If you were following along with me in the very first chapter in this title, you may recall we talked about the differences between vector graphics and bitmaps. And I also mentioned that CorelDRAW X4 is mainly a vector illustration type application. In other words, the stuff you create here in CorelDRAW will be vector graphics. That doesn't mean, though, that we can't use bitmap graphics in our projects. So here you can see I've opened up a file. It's called bitmaps1.cdr. If you've got the exercise files and you want to follow along, go to the Lesson 9 folder, and that's where you'll find this one. Open it up. It's a one-pager, and I've got some artistic text, a background, and my bitmap image right here in the middle. One of the nice things about CorelDRAW is that you can use bitmap images, but you can also make changes to bitmap images without leaving CorelDRAW. So in this chapter, we're going to look at things like applying special effects. We'll use the Image Adjustment Lab to do some minor adjustments to our images. We'll look at cropping, as well as converting vector objects we create into bitmaps so we can use those bitmap effects. So if you've got this open, we're going to click on the bitmap image to select it. And you'll notice up at the top there's a menu dedicated to working with bitmaps. There it is right up there. If I click on it, you're going to notice a lot of bitmap options. Converting objects to bitmaps up there. There's some adjustment tools. Editing a bitmap will actually take you out of CorelDRAW and into Corel Photo Paint, where you've got many more options for editing the actual image. We're going to do that later on in this title. You can see resampling, changing modes, tracing. We'll talk about that later as well. This is the section, though, in this lesson that we're going to focus in on where we see all of our different effects. And we're going to start up here with our 3D effects just to get some background in how to preview your effects. So let's go over here to the right. And we'll go down to a very popular one called the Page Curl, and we'll click on it. This opens up a dialog box. Yes, it does say Page Curl, but there's something very important about this dialog box you need to know, and that is you can go to your other effects right from here. In other words, you don't have to cancel things, close it up, go back to your bitmaps menu every time you want to try something different. You can do it all from here, and you can preview your work in many different ways. So right now you can see the default settings. The page curl is going to curl from the top corner in a vertical direction. Transparent means that the curl itself, you'll be able to see through it. If we make it opaque, then we can choose some colors. We can adjust the width and the height of the curl. They're defaulted at 50. So let's say I want to change it to the bottom right corner. Use a horizontal direction. Keep things transparent. Keep the width and the height as they are and see what that looks like. There's a couple different ways to do that. I've got some preview buttons up here that will open up this page curl dialog box a little bit. The first one gives me a split screen. So when I click on it, you can see right now I'm seeing the image in two halves here. Now as I click and drag with my hand tool down to the bottom right corner, eventually you might see the curl over here on the right when we click on our preview button. So with this opened up, clicking the preview button will preview it over here in the right panel. So I can move this down and over a little bit, click preview to see the end result. Probably not the best effect for this particular type of preview. So we'll turn that off by clicking it and go to the other option, which is to view just the image itself up here in a preview screen. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom right corner here and click my preview button. And now you can see a better preview of what that might look like. I can move it around, preview it again. And if I don't like having to hit that preview button over and over again, I can lock it on. Clicking the lock button locks it. Now when I make a change like change transparent to opaque, for example, I see it instantaneously using the two colors, gray and white. If I want to add some color to that, maybe I want to go with a blue instead of a gray. Try a light blue. Right away you see what it's going to look like in the preview because we've locked it down. I'm going to click the lock button to unlock the preview. And I'm going to close up this image. I'm going to close that up as well so we don't have anything showing up at the top. And if you prefer to preview things right on the page itself, well, make sure nothing's open at the top and then click your preview button to see the result down below. And of course we can lock that as well if we want to see changes instantaneously. Let's change the width to something a little bit bigger. And when I click up there around 72, you can see the result. I can also adjust the height so it's coming further off the page. There we go. Now it's starting to cut things off, so the beauty of the preview is I can make adjustments to get it exactly where I want before I save those changes by clicking OK. Don't do that. We're actually going to hit the reset button after we unlock the preview. Resetting always takes us right back where we started, resets all of these settings, and instead of clicking cancel here and going on to another effect, we can access those effects right from here. There's a little flyout button. It's almost hidden in the top right corner. But clicking it gives us access to that bitmaps menu with all of our effects down below. So here's our 3D effects. Let's try one more. I'm going to go over to the sphere here, which is kind of cool. This dialog box allows me to create almost like a sphere underneath my image. So it's like bubbling up. If I click my preview button with the default settings, you'll see what that looks like. It's like a bubble in the middle. And that's a neat effect. It's kind of a creative effect. I'm optimizing for speed. If I want to optimize for quality and hit preview, it might take a little bit longer to preview that image, but it's going to be a quality image as opposed to a fast image. You can see it's taking much longer with quality selected. And there's my preview down below. I can adjust percentages. You can see over here I've got the wireframe view of what I've got selected. If I click here on this little arrow, it allows me to go in and choose where I want the center of that bubble to be. And then of course I can make adjustments, maybe a smaller. You can see it actually goes in the opposite direction from a bump to an indent. And I'm going to go just a slight bump and click my preview button. With quality still selected, take a little bit longer. And eventually I'll see the end result change right here on my page. So there it goes. It's not quite as extreme as it was a minute ago. If I like that, I would click OK to save it, but I'm going to reset this and try some other ones. So let's go back to our flyout, and we'll skip past the 3Ds now and go into art strokes. If you want to create a special effect out of this image, in other words, turn it from a photograph into something like a sketch, using pen and ink, maybe using crayons or pencils. You've got all of these art stroke effects to choose from. I'm going to go to charcoal right here at the top. Move this out of the way so you can see the preview on the page itself. Using the defaults, I'll just click the preview button to see what that looks like. You can see if I was to take a charcoal pencil and just use it to sketch this out, it might look just like what you see here. Kind of cool. I can adjust the size and the edge of my charcoal. So if I make a change, I'm going to make it a little more extreme, go up to 5 here with a bigger piece of charcoal, click preview, and I'll see what that looks like. And it's a totally different effect, but very realistic. If you were to print this out, people might be fooled into believing you sketched this out with a charcoal pencil. I'm going to click reset and go back to my flyout now so I don't have to go back to the bitmaps menu and check out one more art stroke. Let's go down to one that I really like, watercolor. Watercolor's kind of neat. And if you've ever worked with watercolors, you know you can change brush sizes, the granulation, the amount of water, the amount of bleed, and brightness. So let's see what the defaults look like. I'm going to bump up my brush a little bit though and click preview. So it takes a minute to transform this into a watercolor type image. And you can see that's kind of neat. I like that. You could print this out. And if you've got a good printer, again, people might be fooled into believing this is an actual watercolor. I'm going to reset that. And let's check out some other categories now. Those were art strokes. We can do blurs. Now this image actually has a bit of a blur. Outside of the main tortoise there, you can see the background image is a little bit blurry. And that was probably using one of these effects. You've got motion blurs, you've got radial blurs. I'm going to go down to zoom here and show you a neat effect. And again, I encourage you to experiment with these effects. I'm going to increase the amount, and the focal point can be adjusted by clicking this little button here. I want my tortoise here right where the shell and the neck meet to be the focal point. So I just click once there, click preview to see what that looks like. And it's going to have the effect of zooming into that focal point or zooming out and away from that focal point. So that's a neat effect. Maybe it's a little too much. I can adjust that by bumping it down and previewing again. Remember, you've got your lock button if you want to see instantaneous previews, and that's actually a nicer effect right there. Again, clicking OK would save it, but we're going to hit reset to try out some other categories. When I click the flyout, let's go down to, well, you'll notice camera only has one option, that is to diffuse it. So we're going to save some of the camera effects for later on with PhotoPaint. But under color transform, you can change things to bit, planes, halftones, and then we've got a couple of options using color, solarize, and psychedelic. I'm going to go to solarize. I'm going to move this out of the way, click preview to see what the defaults look like, and then I might want to make some adjustments at this point. So the level's right in the middle there. I'm going to move it down to about a quarter at 65. Click preview to see that effect. You can see that's much darker. Let's go up to the other extreme, 225, and click preview. This could be much brighter. And actually that works with this image. It's kind of neat. That's the solarize effect. Let's reset Go back to our flyout. Let's go down to creative. There's lots of creative ones in here. Some of them are kind of cool. For example, you've got glass blocks, kids play, which is kind of like Lego. And as we go down, you'll see some other ones for smoke glass and stained glass. And if we go down to a vortex or weather, you can add weather effects. I'm going to try weather. And it's not likely going to be snowy or rainy or foggy underwater. But let's say for some reason it's snowing underwater. We'll leave snow selected. The strength of the flurry won't be a storm, but maybe between a flurry and a storm. And the size, let's knock it down so the flakes aren't too big. Randomize means we can randomize the effects of the snow. So if I click preview here, you can see that that's a lot of snow. The strength, I'm going to knock it down a little bit. I'm going to click the randomize button. See, 534 is the number that shows up when I click preview. That's a totally different effect. Click randomize to try another one. Click preview, and that's a totally different look. Definitely not something that applies to our image, so let's reset it and go back to our flyout. And let's skip over creative and go to distort. We can distort these things using blocks, displacement. We can pixelate it, swirl it. I'm going to go down to swirl, which is a cool effect. I get to see a wireframe. We can change the direction clockwise or counterclockwise. We can choose our focal point just like we did with the zoom blur. I'm going to click on it, and this is going to be my point right here where the neck meets the shell. Whole rotations, we've got additional degrees over here. You can see the effect according to what we choose here. That's a very big swirl. If I go up here, that's really swirled. So I'm going to make it very subtle, not quite at the beginning, but let's get a nice swirl in there. Optimize for speed, and additional degrees can be added or removed. So I'm going to bring it down to 0. And I'm going to click preview to see what that looks like. You can see I really can't tell what it is, but it's a cool artistic effect. Let's bring the rotations down now to 0, actually just above 0. And of course we can go in here and type in values if we wanted to. I'm going to come in here and type in 4. And when I click preview, the effect is exaggerated. Kind of neat. We'll click reset though and go back to our flyout. I do want to show you one more distort. Let's go back to distort here and go down to wet paint because it's kind of neat. Wet paint gives you the effect that the paint hasn't dried and it's dripping. So we can adjust the wetness and the percentage. Let's just click preview with the default settings. And there's our wet painting. And it's really dripping. So the percent can be decreased if we wanted to. I'm going to go to 51, right around the middle. And it's more subtle. You'd have to look closely. I'm going to bump it back up to about 76 and bring the wetness all the way up to 50 to preview that. But we'll reset, and let's go back to our flyout, and let's go down to noise. Now noise can be an effect that you want. Sometimes it's an effect that you get in your photos that you don't want, and you may need to sharpen. So noise and sharpen here are the exact opposites. Noise can be added for an effect. Let's go down to, how about median here? And you can see its radius is set to 1. If I preview this, you'll get the effect of noise. If you've ever taken photos when it's dark, for example, I'm going to bump that up to 10 now and preview that. Sometimes you see that graininess in your image, and likely that's what would be caused by a little bit of jiggle in the camera, or with the iris open a little bit longer, things can happen. You can remove noise, but you can also add it to give a special effect. And you can see the effect here is a non-realistic looking photo, but it's kind of cool nonetheless. We'll click reset and talk about the opposite. When we go to our flyout now and go down to sharpen, you can see we've got some options for sharpening our image. Now also under noise, you have the ability to remove noise here. So remove moire or remove noise. If there is any noise, when we click on it and preview that, we might see the image sharpen up. Now with those really extreme cases where maybe it was really dark and you got a lot of pixelation or graininess, removing noise will not always be perfect, but it might improve your image at least. I'm going to reset. And let's go back now to our flyout and look at the sharpen options. So you want to add some sharpness to this. You've got a whole bunch of options here. Adaptive, directional, high pass, there's sharpen, and an unsharp mask. I'm going to go with the high pass. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to bump my radius up to 11 and click preview. watch what happens to the image. You can see how sharp that is. In fact, it's made it totally unrealistic, and it's almost like it's embossed. Let's move the radius back down here to about 3. I'm going to go to 2. Percentage, leave it at 100 and click Preview. And now you can see that I almost can't see the image at all. So let's bump our percentage down here to about 22 and try a preview. And that's actually a sharper looking image that's more like the original image. Bump that up slightly to 25 and see what that looks like. So you can see it takes a little bit of fiddling. You're going to adjust those things. If you like to lock your preview so you can see the preview without hitting the preview button, that'll save you some time. And each time you let go, you're going to see the end result automatically unlock the preview if you want to use the preview button. I'm going to reset that back to where it was and click Cancel. Now that is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to applying effects to bitmaps in your CorelDRAW images here. So as you're working with CorelDRAW and you're adding images to your projects, keep in mind you've got those bitmap effects. You're not necessarily editing the bitmap. We'll do that later using PhotoPaint, but you can apply a number of effects to those bitmaps. There's also something called the Image Adjustment Lab that will help us adjust our images. That's what we're going to look at in the next lesson.